Good evening. Welcome to AC Transit's Transit Talks. My name is Claudia Burgos, Director of Legislative Affairs and Community Relations at AC Transit. Transit Talks is an opportunity for AC Transit's leadership team to share community updates on bus service, who we serve, and our plans for the future as we all navigate our way out of this pandemic. Our agenda for this evening is simple. We're going to start with opening remarks from members of the AC Transit Board of Directors. We will then move into a presentation of approximately 45 minutes, which will be delivered by key members of the AC Transit team, including our General Manager, Michael Hirsch. So we're going to get the program started. I want to introduce AC Transit Board of Directors that are in attendance, starting with our Board President, Elsa Ortiz, who was elected to the Board of Directors in November of 2006. She is serving her 4th term on the AC Transit Board. She represents the entire city of Alameda, as well as portions of Oakland and San Leandro. President Ortiz is also serving her 3rd term as president of the board. Also with us this evening is Director Chris Peebles. Director Peebles was appointed to the AC Transit Board of Directors in November of 1997, elected in 98, and re-elected 6 times since then. He serves as one of 2 at-large directors. I'm now going to turn the microphone over to President Ortiz for a few remarks, and she will be immediately followed by Director Peebles. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. Good evening, and thank you for taking the time to join us. My name is Elsa Ortiz, President of the AC Transit Board of Directors. I am pleased to join you this evening. This has been a difficult year for us at AC Transit. The pandemic has impacted revenue and ridership at a level never previously seen. I have spent the last year advocating for funding at the federal and state levels and also for vaccine prioritization for our employees. I am hopeful about the new administration commitment to ensuring we have long-term sustainable funding in place to support public transit nationwide. Long-term sustainable funding to support operations is what we need in order to restore service to previous levels, and that will continue being one of my priorities. My hope is that you will find this evening meeting informative, that you will be able to share your questions and comments with us. In this time that has been difficult for so many, thank you for joining me and my colleagues at AC Transit to learn what's happening as we attempt to recover from the pandemic and navigate a path forward. Thank you. I will now turn over to my fellow board member, Director Chris Peebles. Chris.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I'm sorry that I look a little bit strange. I'm at dialysis, so my iPad is sitting in my lap and I have to be masked. It gives me a great pleasure to be part of this meeting with Alameda. Alameda gives us the example of how to partner with AC Transit. From your electeds to your staff, there's great cooperation with AC Transit going all the way back to Mayor Appizato, who set up first a transit committee and then a transit commission, and which the commission still exists, but we also have an interagency liaison committee where 2 members from the AC Transit Board and the mayor and 1 council member meet together once a quarter. It was the first ILC, and I think it is still the most successful. Part of it is the commitment of your elected officials, which has been tremendous. And part of it has been your really great staff. All of them are great, but I particularly want to call out Gail Payne, who really works with us together very closely. What that means is we know what development Alameda is planning, what issues the constituents are bringing to the electeds, and they can share them with us. And it's a great thing. And part of it is because Alameda has the largest proportion of people who commute on AC Transit of any of our cities, particularly those that commute Trans-Bay. So I'm very glad to be here, and thank you for all your cooperation over the years.
Thank you, Director.
Oh, and I am supposed to turn it over to Mike Hirsch, our great general manager.
But before our general manager joins, I want to acknowledge two more that I'm seeing here on the list. We have from the East Bay Mud Board of Directors, Doug Linney. Thank you, Director Linney, for being with us. And also from Senator Skinner's office, we have Audrey Mamone. Thank you, Audrey, for being with us. And with that, I will now turn the mic over to our general manager, Michael Hirsch.
Thank you so much, Claudia. Good evening. I am the general manager, Mike Hirsch. Happy to be here tonight. I wish we were back out in the field meeting in person, but we're surviving. We're taking care of business during the pandemic, and I'm glad we can all be here. I want to thank President Ortiz and Director Peebles for their remarks. I have to start by thanking the frontline workers of AC Transit. During this pandemic, they have been the definition of an essential worker. You'll see in my talk tonight that we are providing truly critically needed service. And if it wasn't for the operators, the mechanics, the cleaning staff, field supervision, our central control folks, we would not have this incredible service we do. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you for everybody on the call. Please be safe. I hope you find this talk very interesting. I do want to thank you for joining us tonight and for your continued support as we work to restore and rebuild service in the 13 cities, 8 unincorporated areas of Alameda and Contra Costa counties. We pride ourselves in being the 3rd largest public bus system in California, bus only, and 3rd largest transit agency in the San Francisco Bay Area. Our service is critical to the regional economy. Prior to the pandemic, we were carrying more than 15,000 people on our Trans-Bay service, the Bay Bridge, San Mateo Bridge, Dumbarton, and we were carrying more than 30,000 students to school daily. I'm proud that just this past week, we restarted some of our supplementary school service. We look forward to the schools reopening and the students coming back to that service. Whether you're a rider, a business owner, an elected official, even if you drive, I wish you didn't, but even if you do, I guarantee you that anything that impacts AC Transit in one way or another impacts you too. Prior to March 2020, we carried nearly 189,000 weekday riders, more than 53 million riders annually. As of last week, our ridership is still down 60% compared to the pre-pandemic levels. Our Trans-Bay ridership has been severely impacted due to people working from home and not commuting. But the pandemic will not last forever. Vaccines are here. I firmly believe we're coming to the end of this very difficult time. When the economy reopens, we will continue playing a critical role in the Bay Area's transportation network, connecting with 16 other public and private bus systems. We connect to 25 BART stations, 6 Amtrak stations, and 4 ferry terminals. And when Alameda's Seaplane Lagoon Ferry Terminal opens, we will connect to that ferry terminal as well. While our overall ridership today is a fraction of what it was before the pandemic, we continue providing a critical service, in particular for those that have continued to ride during the pandemic. AC Transit has always been a lifeline for many of our service, and our service has always been a critical component of the fabric of many communities. Ensuring the sustainability of AC Transit service is truly a matter of equity. And that's given that 65% of our riders are low income, 75% are people of color. A rider survey conducted during the pandemic revealed that those still riding are truly dependent on our service. 40% are making essential trips, i.e. to work, school, obviously medical appointments, getting groceries, etc. 15% have identified as essential workers. 43% indicated they don't even have access to a car. Today, our ridership is the second highest in the Bay Area, second only to SFMTA Muni as we know it. During the pandemic, AC Transit staff has been hard at work every day getting service on the road. As I mentioned, our frontline employees, the operators, mechanics, road supervisors, they've come to work every day getting essential workers where they need to go. And behind the scenes, AC Transit staff have been busy all year long on a variety of key projects. We're proud that we were, even in the middle of a pandemic, able to open our Tempo bus rapid transit service. The first in the East Bay was launched in August of 2020, again in the middle of the pandemic. The Tempo system runs a 9.5-mile route through the cities of Oakland and San Leandro. It operates on 10-minute headways and buses traveling 80% of the route in dedicated bus-only lanes. We're seeing on-time performance levels of 84%, which is unprecedented in the Bay Area. We've added innovative technology to assist our riders. Our IT and marketing communications departments have been focused on developing technologies aimed at improving the rider experience. This year alone, we launched our first ever official mobile app that offers real-time information, a new contactless fare payment option using your phone, access to our customer service. Additionally, we launched a new rider capacity feature, which offers riders real-time information about bus capacity levels. We launched a new website earlier this year and completed a full renovation of our customer service center in downtown Oakland, which is now open to the public. In March, AC Transit was named Employer of the Year by the San Francisco Bay Area chapter of Women's Transportation Seminar, WTS, in recognition of our commitment to the advancement of women in the transportation industry. In January, we joined the Clipper Start program, a pilot program offering a 20% discount to eligible low-income riders. In March, we launched an all-door boarding pilot on 2 lines, the 6 line and the 51B, to help speed up boarding by allowing riders paying with Clipper to board and tag their Clipper card at the rear door, therefore speeding up the boarding process and improving reliability. In 2020, we introduced battery electric buses to our fleet, adding to our current zero-emission fleet of hydrogen fuel cell buses. When federal and state officials announced they would establish a mass vaccination site at the Oakland Coliseum, we answered the call by providing free shuttle service, getting over 3,800 residents to their vaccine appointment. The service did conclude on April 18th. Despite the challenges of the pandemic, we've remained committed to advancing projects to improve the rider experience and better serve our customers. We are already seeing evidence of a change that is forcing all of us to plan and operate differently. And at AC Transit, we're doing just that, adjusting, innovating, doing our best to respond to the needs of riders as travel patterns continue evolving. Staff has prepared a couple of live poll questions tonight to receive instant feedback that will help our planners in the efforts to build a bus network that is responsive to the needs of our community. In fact, we have our first live poll right now. Can we get the first poll up on the screen? For those listening, the question is, how will you travel once you return to work, school, or other activities? The choices are drive alone, carpool, ride public transit, bike, walk, Uber or Lyft, TNCs, transportation network companies, or mix it up. We'd like to see that 6% drive alone, 0% carpool. That's interesting. Over 18 participants, 50% of you said public transit. Nobody said TNC, 6% said bike, 6% walk, and 33%, 12 participants said they're going to mix it up. With that, I'll turn the mic over to AC Transit's Acting Director of Marketing and Communications, Nichelle Lanes, who will speak about AC Transit's commitment to health and safety. Again, thank you for being here tonight. I look forward to the rest of the conversation and presentation.
Thank you, General Manager Hirsch. Good evening, Nichelle Lanes, Acting Director of Marketing and Communications. And I'm pleased to speak with you about the safety measures AC Transit has in place to continue to provide you a safe ride. In accordance with the state and county mandates, AC Transit has taken a proactive approach to ensure safety and wellness measures for riders and operators. I want to emphasize and remind everyone that AC Transit, since the beginning of the pandemic, has and continues to require face coverings while riding on our buses. To aid in this requirement, mask and hand sanitizer, personal protective equipment, or PPEs, are available on every bus for our riders. Signage on every bus reminds riders to maintain a 6-foot social distance and to wear their face coverings correctly. Our buses are cleaned and fogged each day with a disinfectant. All of our operators currently use the positive airflow ventilation procedure implemented during the COVID-19 pandemic. This procedure requires all windows to be closed, the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, or HVAC, on, and the rear roof hatch placed in the fully opened position. This pushes the particulates through the roof hatch and refreshes onboard air 50 times an hour. Additionally, our maintenance department created a COVID shield for each bus. This latching shield encloses the operator for more protection from the spread of COVID-19. Finally, buses now have a COVID limit line on the floor near the operator to ensure a 6-foot distance between the riders and the operators. So one of the challenges of social distancing on the buses is a significant reduction in the rider loads we can typically carry. We are limited to about 25% of our normal bus loads, between 10 and 24 riders, depending on the bus type. As AC Transit complies with the CDC guidance on rider capacity, when our rider capacity has been reached, we must make the difficult call of not onboarding additional riders. We realize that with fewer seats available due to these social distancing requirements, knowing bus occupancy levels as you plan your trip is a critical factor in successfully navigating our system in this unprecedented time and beyond. To that end, our innovation and technology team added a new feature to assist our riders within our AC Transit ACT real-time bus arrival predictor. The general manager mentioned that earlier in his slide. The rider capacity feature enables riders to view real-time bus capacities by line. And additionally, once a bus has reached its capacity, our operators reach out to our Operations Control Center, or OCC, to send out another bus to ease overcrowding. And now I'm going to turn it over to AC Transit's Chief Financial Officer, Chris Andrzejczyk, who will present on the topic, emergency funding for public transit.
Thank you, Nichelle. As she mentioned, I'm Chris Andrzejczyk, the CFO for AC Transit. I manage all aspects of the district's funding and finances and make sure that we have the funds we need to operate the essential service we provide. Tonight, I'll offer a high-level overview of AC Transit's financial conditions and how we're getting through the pandemic. I want to emphasize that while we have received emergency funding, this funding replaced the operational funds we lost during the pandemic as ridership plummeted. It's not additional funding, it is emergency funding that has kept us afloat. AC Transit received $114 million from the initial CARES Act from the federal government in the middle of last year. We used $30 million to fill in revenue losses for our last fiscal year, which was 2019 through 2020, and the remaining $84 million to fill in revenue losses for this fiscal year, 2020 through 2021. Looking at our next fiscal year, 2021 through 2022, we don't think the economy will be back to normal, nor do we think our regular revenues will have returned in full for the next fiscal year, which starts July 1st. We will be using the second federal aid package, known as the CARES Act, to fill in the $56 million in revenue losses we project for this coming fiscal year. So again, the takeaway here is that we currently have been able to balance our budget until now, thanks to federal aid we have received, and also because we've reduced expenses and are providing, unfortunately, just 75% of the service we would normally provide. So just backing up a little bit, prior to the pandemic, AC Transit was in a pretty good financial position. What has helped us in this pandemic is that AC Transit has a more diverse revenue source mix than some other agencies. We are funded by a combination of sales taxes, property taxes, fare box revenues, bridge toll funds, and other things, compared to some other agencies. All property owners in AC Transit service area pay $8 a month in a parcel tax to support our essential service. We are extremely grateful for the voters that have continued to support this measure and this essential funding for AC Transit throughout the year. Stable funding like this has helped keep our revenues from dropping as much as other agencies, particularly those that depend on fare box revenues, such as BART, Caltrain, Golden Gate Transit, and San Francisco Muni. The chart on the right, it's a little hard to read, but mainly what it shows are the different types of revenues that a selection of different agencies received. The point is to show that we are all funded from a different mix of sources. And for those people listening on the phone, there's a very colorful bar chart on the screen, which basically shows what I said, that various agencies have a different spread of revenue, from fare box to sales taxes to all different kinds of things. And so the agencies throughout the Bay Area are not all alike in the funding realm. So looking forward, it's hard to predict what will happen with the economy and with transit ridership. What we're experiencing is not a normal recession. However, based on prior recessions, we do think it could take a couple years before employment levels reach what they were before the pandemic. Since March of last year, many jobs have been moved from the office and into our homes. We are hearing and expecting that work from home and outside of the office or workplace will continue to some degree for those that can, which will mean reduced Trans-Bay and local ridership. We are doing our best, but cannot control when people might return to transit, particularly if they have other transportation choices. So coming back to funding, we are fortunate and grateful to have received 2 rounds of emergency federal aid to support our operations so far. This federal funding has been critical in stopping the bleeding, but it has not made us whole. President Biden recently signed the American Rescue Plan into law, which will provide a 3rd round of federal aid. At this time, we do not know how much we will be getting from the American Rescue Plan. However, emergency federal aid will not continue forever, so we must plan for a service level that we can support with our regular revenues once the federal aid runs out. Next, we'll talk about how we plan for future service. But before we do that, we will have another poll for you to participate in. This poll is asking you to share how many days per week you expect to be commuting. And for those on the phone, the answers are I will work or attend school from home, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or more, and I don't know. All right, looks like we've got the results. So coming in first, 5 or more days at 15 responders, or 38%. Second was 4 days at 18%. Third was I don't know at 15%. Fourth was 3 days at 13%. And then 0 days, 5%. I will work or attend school from home at 5%. And 1 day at 3%. And with that, I will turn it over to Robert Del Rosario.
Great, thanks, Chris. Good evening, everyone. My name is Robert Del Rosario, the Director of Service Development and Planning for AC Transit, and I will discuss our current and future plans for service recovery and restoration. As we all know, in March of 2020, California experienced a shutdown due to the pandemic and corresponding public health order, which results in a dramatic drop in ridership. To respond to significant ridership declines and possible workforce availability issues, we immediately shifted to 65% of pre-pandemic service levels by essentially switching to Sunday service 7 days a week. We eliminated peak-only Trans-Bay service, supplementary service, and a few low-frequency local routes. Fortunately, as Chris mentioned, federal aid has helped us to create a stopgap measure as our various funding sources start to come back to pre-pandemic levels. With the support of federal funding, the district is currently operating at 75% of pre-pandemic levels with a reduced operating budget. Ridership continues to trend at less than 40% of pre-pandemic levels. Looking ahead, staff began planning for what service would look like as the region recovers. Due to the dynamic nature of the pandemic recovery patterns, conditions have been difficult to forecast, and the situation has been in flux since that time, making planning for the future challenging. There are some critical drivers that we'll need to be in place to assist with development of a new network that will operate based on a new normal. These drivers are recruitment of bus operators. So we attrited bus operators. We unfortunately did not lay off operators, but some operators did leave the district. And now we have to bring replacement operators back in order to quickly grow our service or return to pre-pandemic levels. And this will allow us to operate some service that's at the levels that we hope to be. We are recruiting operators as we speak, as the hiring and onboarding training can take 4 to 5 months. Another factor is data collection on ridership patterns based on some level of predictability in the region as we safely reopen. And that data will come in as ridership patterns, as the question that Chris mentioned and the question that General Manager Hirsch mentioned. That data will be key to us, and getting more of that data in the future will be key to us for setting our network. And then there's final decisions by businesses, facilities, and institutions on whether they're going to operate fully remote or have some level of return to on-site work. And this will really help us in planning a lot of our commute-based service. We need to make sure we don't implement service that doesn't meet the new needs of riders post-pandemic. With the additional COVID-19 relief funding expected to come as part of the American Rescue Plan, staff is cautiously optimistic that the current service levels can at least be maintained through the end of fiscal year 21-22, and we hope we can do more. We will continue to engage with you as we plan to implement a new network that includes more service pending available funding. A proposed new network will be vetted by the public and approved by the board for implementation in summer 2022. Tonight's polls will help give us a sense of what might be happening with your travel plans as it relates to public transit trips to work, school, and other essential activities. Now we'll go back to the existing service in Alameda. As you can see, we're operating all of our local routes in Alameda, many at pre-pandemic levels, though there are some, such as the 19, where we're operating still at reduced frequency. Much of our current trans-based service is suspended, and we're strategizing on how we can bring that back. So moving on to the timeline in the next slide, I'm going to take a moment to walk you through how we're going to incrementally increase service and ultimately implement the new network, which will include a couple of rounds of public engagement activities to feed into this planning effort. We are currently holding transit talks, such as tonight, a series of community update meetings throughout our district in geographical clusters to provide information and to hear from you. This activity is occurring online and via phone. In mid-April, we restored some of our supplementary school chipper service, as the general manager mentioned, in response to those school districts who returned to in-person instruction, along with some minor adjustments to bring some local service back online. Moving forward, we'll be making more adjustments to bring back some service in August of 2021, especially as schools plan to fully reopen, and we hope to add even more service in next spring, provided funding is available. And hoping that there's some semblance of normalcy, staff proposes outreach and engagement activities in the fall of this year to help plan for a new network with better information on budget, ridership trends, and patterns. This activity will occur before staff develops any new proposals and will happen over an 8-week period of outreach and communications that will include surveys, online engagement, virtual events, and outreach in the community. The purpose will be to seek input from our riders and community about their future travel plans and needs, and to learn what's important to riders as we plan for service. This outreach will help the district plan for equitable service growth and assist with difficult trade-off decisions that go beyond ridership data and trends. Then we will take all of the data and information received to develop a plan. We will then launch into community outreach engagement in early 2022 to support the district's public hearing process on approving a draft plan. This activity will be a 6-week public outreach and communications period seeking public response and comments. This formal public engagement process will give district staff the opportunity to make additional adjustments to the plan based on feedback and to bring a final proposal to the board of directors for approval. The final phase of service recovery outreach will be an ambassador education and communications effort to assist riders with service changes in their communities. Again, the objective is to implement a new service network in the summer of 2022. Now let's jump to the final live poll question to seek information. And that question is, help AC Transit set its priorities for recovery. What action should come first? And the choices are improve service to disadvantaged communities, improve service on major transit lines where ridership is highest, increase service to cover as much of the service area as possible, and restore trans-based service. And I'll pause there to see if we can get responses. Okay, and the responses are in. So number 1, improve service to disadvantaged communities, 36%. Improve service on major transit lines came next at 25%. Next came increased service to cover as much of the service area as possible at 22%. And then finally, 17% said to restore trans-based service. I think one thing that's interesting in this is that there was no overwhelming majority of the responses. And so that's going to be very interesting as we plan our service going forward. That concludes my presentation. I will turn it back to General Manager Hirsch to talk about efforts beyond the pandemic. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Robert, and good evening again, everyone. Robert, you called out exactly what I noticed about that poll. There was each response was so closely grouped. It's definitely going to be a challenge going ahead. We will start the Q&A portion shortly, but I'd like to share some project updates with you that are not related to the pandemic, but are important to our future operations. Since the year 2000, AC Transit has been building the most comprehensive zero-emission bus, or ZEB, program in the United States. Initially focused on hydrogen fuel cell technology, and most recently expanded to include battery electric buses, making our zero-emission program one of the most sophisticated programs in the country. Today, all of our zero-emission buses are prioritized to serve our most disadvantaged communities, which are also the most impacted by environmental factors. We're currently running a side-by-side comparison of hydrogen fuel cell and battery electric buses, in addition to conventional diesel, diesel hybrid, and our older legacy fuel cell buses. The study will offer detailed comparisons of each technology's performance, reliability, fuel efficiency, capital, and operating costs. All transit agencies in California are required to operate 100% zero-emission bus fleet by the year 2040. And in many ways, we are way ahead of the curve compared to other transit agencies in the state. However, our challenge will be securing the funding needed to upgrade our facilities and build the infrastructure needed to adequately accommodate 100% zero-emission fleet. We currently have several corridor projects underway, which are aimed at enhancing operations and improving service reliability along the Telegraph, Grand, West Grand, San Pablo, and Dumbarton corridors. These projects include installation of Transit Signal Priority, or TSP. That equipment allows our buses to communicate with traffic signals for faster travel along these corridors and to give buses priority at intersections. Bus stop relocations, what we call far side, which is after you cross the street, to prevent our buses from being stuck at traffic lights and to improve access to the curb as well as safety. We also are implementing ADA access. Lastly, we're actively engaged at the state legislative level to help advance legislation that prioritizes transit on our streets and highways. Former Assembly member, now Attorney General Rob Bonta, introduced a bill that will improve transit service into and out of San Francisco by installing a transit-only lane on the Bay Bridge. With Bonta's confirmation as State Attorney General, Assemblymember Buffy Wicks has agreed to carry this bill. If passed into law, the bill will play an important first step in helping to improve the reliability of our trans-based service, which is frequently bogged down in traffic jams. Through the Blue Ribbon Transit Recovery Task Force, AC Transit is working with other Bay Area transit agencies to coordinate service planning, operations, communications, and a response during the pandemic. This includes improving regional connectivity, improving the customer experience, particularly as it relates to travel on multiple systems, and focusing on equity to make sure that the region's transit network is accessible and affordable to all. I'll conclude my remarks here and hand the mic back over to Claudia Burgos to introduce the Q&A segment of Transit Talks. Again, thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you, General Manager Hirsch, and thank you to all of the presenters. We recognize that that was a lot of information to share with you, but we thought it was important to share not only the ways in which we've been impacted by the pandemic and how we've responded to the pandemic, but also to highlight a number of the additional key initiatives that we've been focused on during the last year, all of which are aimed at improving service quality, reliability, and the rider experience. Now with that, we're going to transition over to the Q&A portion of the program. We are running a little bit ahead of schedule, which is good. So first, I'm going to review how people joining this meeting on the phone. I see we have a couple of phone participants. I'm going to review how you can participate in this Q&A portion of the program. And then while I give instructions to those on the English line, the interpreters are going to give the same instructions and specific to those that are participating via the Spanish and Chinese phone lines. So for those of you, again, that are on the Zoom on your computer, or on your smartphone. If you have a question, please put it in the chat, and that's how we're going to take questions from those that are on the Zoom. And for those of you that are on the phone line, for English speaking participants calling into the meeting by phone, again, I see, looks like we have 2. When we get to questions, I will call for anybody who has a question that's on the phone. You will need to dial *9 to raise your hand, and then Tammy's going to help me out by calling out the last 4 digits, and then you will be allowed to mute yourself. And the Spanish and Chinese interpreters have just given the same instructions to those on the phone. So with that, we will go ahead and take the first question. I see there's a couple of questions in the chat here. I'm going to ask Robert Del Rosario, our Director of Service Planning, to help with this one. There's a couple of questions that have to do generally with when we're going to restore service. These questions came in before you gave your presentation, but there's one in here about restoring service to the hills. I see one in here about somebody who really misses the H, their Transbay bus, and they want to know when it's going to be reinstated. So can you just reiterate, I know it was in your presentation, but again, these came in before, just reiterate a little bit about how we're going to go about service recovery and restoration as we move forward. Thank you, Robert.
Definitely. Thanks, Claudia, and thanks for the questions. You know, AC Transit's really proud of our Transbay service. It was very popular pre-pandemic, and it was a real alternate option, a viable alternative option, especially with BART being overcrowded. But one thing that we're not clear on is how people are going to return to work in San Francisco. And we don't know how fast it's going to happen. I firmly believe that Transbay service will be important again in the future and will be a very viable option, and traffic's going to come back. It already is at worse conditions than it was before. But we have to do that carefully, and with limited resources, we have lots of local service that we have to look at, service to disadvantaged communities. So I think our focus is going to be incremental service increases. Looking at schools coming back is probably a key piece. And then we're going to really closely monitor Transbay service. We have a little bit out there, and the ridership is pretty low. And I know there's a chicken and egg theory there about, you know, if we bring the service back, will the people come? So we have to really closely monitor that. But we hope to just bring back small increments of it. But really, we have to gauge what's going on with the job environment in San Francisco to do that. And I think that's the same for all of the local routes with low ridership. We have to make sure that ridership is going to return. And with our limited resources, we want to make sure we focus our resources where the people are going to ride the bus the most. So it's a challenging trade-off that we have to face.
Thank you, Robert. I have another question that's going to be for Chris Andrzejczak. Again, this may have come in before you offered your presentation, but just can you talk a little bit about the federal funding that has come in and how that has been used to plug the deficit that we were facing, as opposed to being extra funds that we some folks might be under the impression that we're sitting on?
Sure. So, you know, again, I've talked before about the various funding sources that AC Transit has, and the things that were really impacted during the pandemic were sales taxes, as people, you know, went home and didn't go out and do all the things that they normally do. And of course, our fare box revenues as our ridership dropped significantly. And so the federal funding for us and for most other transit agencies was really to fill in the loss of revenue that we had. You know, again, looking at last fiscal year, we had about a $30 million hole that we needed to fill. This year, it's about $84 million. And then moving into next year, things are getting better. So the current deficit that we are needing to fill with those funds are about $56 million. And so the big question for us going forward is, at what point do our regular revenues come back enough to where we can operate the service that we want to operate without the federal funds, which, as I said, will not go on forever.
Thank you, Chris. I see we have a question here from our colleague, BART Director Robert Rayburn, and this one's going to be for our General Manager, Michael Hirsch. And it reads, BART expects to restore service frequency and late night service by September 13th. Will AC Transit be able to provide connecting service?
Thank you, Director Rayburn. We're going to do the best we can. As staff have already commented, it's not just a matter of dollars and cents for us. It's also a matter of hiring back operators. We're fortunate we didn't have to lay anybody off. We're proud of that. But we, as Mr. Del Rosario mentioned, we did lose operators through natural attrition, retirement. So we've reopened hiring. If anybody out there is looking for a job, actransit.org. We will hire bus operators and train them as quickly as we can. September might be close. We'll keep a close eye on it. We certainly would like to try to match BART as they restore service to the best of our ability.
Thank you, General Manager Hirsch. Here's another question. What is AC Transit doing to address pass-ups? I think this one will give this one to Robert.
Sure. So a few things. As the general manager mentioned, we were proud to not lay off any operators, and we did, and we reduced service pretty significantly early on and brought some of it back. But that did leave us some cushion of operators, which is dwindling, to allow for addressing pass-ups. And so what happens is if the operator notes that there's a pass-up, he or she will call into our operations control center and let them know that we're going to switch the vehicle to drop off only on that head sign that you see on top of the bus as it drives down the road. And then we will do our best to deploy another vehicle to back up that bus so that we can pick up anyone that was passed up. So we can do this on a very limited basis. We have a lot of data, which is great. So we can see that there are pass-ups on San Pablo Avenue. A lot of our trunk lines, the new BRT, which is extremely popular. So a lot of our trunk lines, we're monitoring this closely and trying to deploy pass-ups as best we can, or deploy standby buses as best we can.
Thank you, Robert. I see a question here that has to do with the cost of disinfecting buses versus pre-pandemic cleaning costs. Chris, do you want to take a shot at that one?
Sure. So I don't have exact numbers, but the main cost at this point is really the equipment and the extra cleaning supplies that we need. And early on in the pandemic, there was a sort of a rush to do as much cleaning as we could, and so it took a little while to integrate that into our cleaning and process when the buses come in at the end of their runs during the day. So that has been integrated as much as it can. Of course, if we don't have to do the extra disinfecting, that would save a little bit of time for the people working on the buses in the beginning and the end of the day. So at this point, I would say the cost is mostly equipment and supplies and a little bit of staff time.
Thank you, Chris. Sticking with the sort of general thread here of pandemic related changes, Robert, can you talk a little bit about how many people are allowed on the bus currently due to our social distancing requirements?
Yeah, we did a lot for the safety of our operators and our passengers early on in the pandemic. And so we limited capacity on the buses pretty quickly. So on a 40-foot bus, which is the type of coach that you usually see out there, that typically has 40 seats. And we've limited it down to 10 passengers on a 40-foot bus. The smaller buses, the 30-foot ones, have 6 passengers. And then our articulated buses, which are, some people call them the accordion buses, those are on our major routes. Those have 16 passengers. So we're operating roughly at about 25% capacity and just really monitoring what's going on with state and the county and other best practices to see how that will change. And we'll have to bring that back to our board to make any adjustments to that.
Thank you, Robert. Nichelle, this next question is going to go to you. You covered the slides regarding what we've done to ensure operator and rider safety. So can you talk a little bit about what some of the efforts and the measures that we've implemented to keep operators and riders safe? You're on mute.
Yeah, sure. Sorry about that. Yeah, we've done a number of measures to keep our operators safe and our riders. From the very beginning, again, we've required masks on our coaches as soon as the pandemic started and folks started sheltering in place. We immediately implemented a requirement of masks, our face coverings on board. We also installed personal protective equipment, PPEs, on all of the coaches. And that took a lot of effort to ensure that we had both face coverings and hand sanitizers on all of the coaches. We refill those every day, so they're always filled. It's not like we just let them go fallow. Once we're done for the day, we continue to fill them. We also, our maintenance team created operator shields that are latching shields that protect our operator from ensuring a social distance. And then we also created a new limit line that's being implemented that again reinforces that 6-foot distance requirement between the operator and the rider. And finally, we do disinfect with a disinfectant fogger. We are on the coaches every day disinfecting the buses with this fogger system that really has an extremely high level of assurance that we are disinfecting the coach from the top to the bottom. So we do a number of initiatives to ensure safety. And as far as we are aware, there's never been an instance of any sort of COVID transmission from any passenger or any operator or vice versa. So we really stand by our safety and wellness implementation.
Nichelle, if I could add to that, Mike Hirsch, General Manager, we also immediately went to rear door boarding. I know that was inconvenient for many of our passengers, but it was done at an abundance of caution for the safety of our operators. That also created a large financial hole. We couldn't collect fares. We had to do that for many months. In fact, I don't think we turned fare collection back on until the September, October timeframe. That was made possible because the operator shields that were installed that had been previously mentioned. But I think our swift decision to go to rear door boarding, our swift decision, and quite frankly, the talent of our procurement people, the general public may not know, as the pandemic unfolded, the competition to find PPE, face masks, and hand sanitizer was extremely tough out there. So I'm proud of the way our team, we were one of the first agencies in the Bay Area to have that for our customers. It was a difficult decision to do the rear door boarding, but I think it was the right decision. Thanks for letting me add on.
Thank you, General Manager Hirsch. This next question is going to go to Robert. It's regarding Alameda's ferry terminals, a very popular topic in Alameda, particularly regarding the bus to ferry connection. So how might AC Transit be able to support the new ferry terminal that's coming on board over at Seaplane Lagoon and encourage more Alameda residents to take the bus to the ferry terminal?
Yeah, great. And I saw the comments that I'm speaking too fast. I think I just get a little too excited. So I will slow down and try to speak a little bit louder and hope that works out. But this is another question I am actually pretty excited about. We are working with WETA and then also with City of Alameda staff. We're going to see if we can provide some service to Seaplane Lagoon, probably from the center of the island using Santa Clara. And if we can get the right approvals in place with coordinating with the ferry folks and the city, as well as getting our board up to speed, we hope we can try a pilot service and maybe implement in August. One of the good things about being in this situation with the pandemic where we reduced a bunch of service, we can now bring back service to locations that we wanted to serve and then move it away from maybe places that weren't doing so great in terms of ridership. And so we're pretty excited that we think we can bring something to Seaplane Lagoon as a pilot service in August, and then we'll just see how it goes for about a year.
Thank you, Robert. We have a question about fares. This one's gonna go to Nichelle. Does AC Transit offer programs for low-income riders?
We do, thank you. We do offer, we just launched, and the general manager referenced this in his earlier slides. We launched in January a program called Clipper Start in partnership with MTC and other transit agencies within the region. Clipper Start provides a 20% discount on adult cash single ride fares to our riders. So you can apply at clippercard.com and get going on applying. You don't have to have a residence. It's ideal for people who also may be unhoused or underhoused. You can still apply for the program. You'll get a special Clipper card that will enable you to have that discounted fare on any agency, transit agency that is also participating in the Clipper Start program. It is currently a pilot, but we fully expect and hope that the program will continue past the pilot phase. As an aside, we do also offer a small we also offer discounted fares as a reminder to our youth, senior, and disabled riders as well. There is a discount on cash and pass fares for those riders as well.
Thank you, Nichelle. We have another question here. I'm going to ask you to keep your mic on. How can I find out if a bus is going to be delayed?
Yeah, I closed my mic too quickly there. Yeah, sure. We have a number of ways to note whether the bus is going to be delayed. One of the main ways we have is with our rider capacity feature, which is featured on ACT Real-Time. ACT Real-Time is AC Transit's real-time bus arrival predictor. You can get it on web, the AC Transit official app, and through a number of third-party apps, including Google Transit, Transit app. You can find this real-time, and 511.org, and you can find this real-time predictor. Using that, you'll see an icon that you'll see these little people that look like red, green, or yellow, and that helps you identify whether the bus is not yet at capacity or is at capacity. And we encourage folks to use this as a tool before you plan your trip. You can also use it when you're already at the bus stop, but the real genius here is to be able to use it before you plan your trip. And you can see as the bus continues to go stop by stop, that iconography will change and help you better determine whether the bus will be full by the time it gets to your stop. So it's a really great feature. We're really thrilled with our IT team and helping us in partnership to develop that. We think it's a real key tool. So, so that's one of the primary ways to find out about bus capacity before you even hop on the bus.
Thank you, Nichelle. I have a question. Actually, this one's going to be for Tabby Davenport of our safety department, who is also with us this evening. This is a question that we see pretty regularly on social media channels. Can you just talk about are the windows supposed to be open? Are they supposed to be closed? What about the hatch? There's some questions in the Q&A about that. Can you just give a quick explanation of what is what and what is the correct thing here?
Yes, thank you. I'm Tabby Davenport, Safety Manager. The reason that we have developed a plan on how to properly ventilate the coach, because there's several different studies out there, several different tests and theories on how the bus should be ventilated. So what we did is we actually ran our own tests. We ran a smoke test to see which was the best way to properly ventilate a coach. And what we found, to make a long story short, the most productive method to ventilate the coach and to properly introduce fresh air into the coach and to impact the passengers and the operators the least is to close all windows, to turn the HVAC system on, and to open up the rear hatch. The reason why we do that, the reason why the windows are to remain closed so that we can properly circulate the air and maintain the integrity of the HVAC system. So what happens is when a window is open, any window on the bus is open, all the air pushes to the front of the coach where it collects. It will sit at the front of the coach, and if the operator opens the window, if the front door is open, then the air rushes to the front and exits through the open window at the driver's side, or exit through the front door. So what that does is that causes all the air to collect and then it will exit, but it will exit past all of the passengers and all of the, and also the bus operator. So keeping the windows closed and the rear hatch open and running the HVAC system, it keeps the continuity of a sealed system of the HVAC system, and it allows the air to be pushed up to the roof hatch out of the rear and exit through the rear of the coach without, with the least amount of exposure to the passengers and the operator.
Thank you, Tabby, for that detailed explanation. I'm going to take a moment here and I'm going to ask Chantal Reynolds, who is AC Transit staff and is managing the Spanish phone line. Chantal, can you just let me know if we have, and if you see any raised hands on your end on the Spanish phone line?
Yes, we have no questions from the Spanish line.
Thank you. Oh, Harvey, there we go. And Stephen Jones, who's managing our Chinese phone line, do you see any questions on your end?
Good evening. There are no questions on the Chinese line.
Thank you. And I don't see any raised hands from the one phone caller that is with us via telephone. So just making sure that we're checking in with everybody. Okay, next question here. This one's for Chris, our CFO. Why do riders have to pay fares? Don't my taxes already pay for the bus system?
So thank you. Thank you for the question.
Oh,
there we go. Fares, people paying fares is a key part of our overall funding. We do get a lot of funding through sales taxes and property taxes. But to offer the most amount of service, the highest amount of service that we can, fares are included in that. And for some perspective, before the pandemic, AC Transit collected about $50 to $60 million in fares per year, and that's a significant part of our operating budget, and it allows us to produce that much more service.
thank you, Chris. Here's another question that just came in. I think we've touched on this, but I'll go ahead and ask it. This one's for Robert. Whether there's any plans to increase hours of operation for the 3 core Transbay lines, the F, the NL, and the O, particularly between the hours of 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. And there's reference here to critical workers, leaving evening shifts, et cetera.
Yeah, we're already operating many of those services at pre-pandemic levels. We'll take a look at the late night service to see if we can get the frequencies up a little bit more. I think one thing that's going to help with this is there was a question about connection with BART service. BART will be also going to a later service span and frequencies, which would help alleviate the situation. So yeah, we'll take a look, but we're hoping that we're going to get some assistance with other services.
Thank you, Robert. I see a question about paying fares with your phone. Nichelle, can you talk about the new tools that we've just deployed for our riders?
Sure. As you can see, I'm super excited about fares. We have a couple of new ways to tap and pay. One way is you can access it through the AC Transit official app and through some third-party providers, partners. So one way is you pay your fare through your mobile device, and you can actually just show it to the operator when you board that your fare is valid. That's what we call our mobile ticketing platform. And then another way that actually was just, and we've been operating that for about 3 or 4 months. And then the other way that we have a tap and pay through our mobile device is through our partner Clipper. Clipper just announced last week that you can use your Apple Pay or your iOS phone and tap on a Clipper reader and board our bus that way. And we're excited to find out when it will be available for Android, but we expect that to be coming sometime soon. So there are right now 2 ways, in addition to Clipper Plastic Card, to pay with contactless payment on all of the AC Transit buses. So we're excited about that.
Thank you, Nichelle. Trying to keep up here with the questions. I think there's a question here about bus stops on Hopkins Avenue. I'm not sure. Robert, do you want to give that one?
So I believe this might be Hopkins Street in city of Berkeley. There's a project on Hopkins that's looking at some sort of complete streets treatment that's been written about and also been discussed amongst the neighbors and some public outreach. And probably the question has to do with the bus stops along that corridor. So we don't have any intention to remove the bus stops. We'll work with the city to see if there's ways that we can improve the bus stops and improve the spacing. But right now we plan to maintain service on that street.
Thank you, Robert. Why don't you go ahead and keep your mic open? I see it's a little bit more of a comment, but it has to do with students returning to public transit. I know you touched on this. Somebody in the presentation early on touched on the topic of students. But why don't you talk a little bit about that, students and the capacity limits and sort of what we're expecting?
Yeah, we're gonna have to again rely on the guidance that we're going to receive from the state and the county, and run these issues by our board of directors to figure out what's the appropriate level of capacity, knowing that in the fall schools are going to, in many cases, fully return. So we're really cognizant of that. We'll try to monitor closely. I know Berkeley doesn't have school trippers like other school districts do. So we can look at vehicle size as long as there's no limits to what size vehicles can run on streets, which is a challenge in the hills. But it's something that we're just gonna have to closely monitor and seek guidance from state and county.
Michelle, will you talk about the student free pass?
Sure. Thanks, Director Ortiz, President Ortiz. So through Alameda County and through the Alameda CTC, which I'm blanking on what CTC stands for, which is why I'm not bringing that up.
County Transportation Commission.
Thank you. Through the Transportation Commission, they have partnered with cities and with transit and with AC Transit to offer at certain schools, identified schools, the ability for students and families within certain demographics and certain economic income levels to receive a free or greatly reduced pass, student pass. So there are a number of schools within Alameda County who are a part of the program. If your school, and I believe that information is found on Alameda CTC's website. So if you are a school that's eligible, or if you have a student at a school that's eligible, we encourage you to reach out to your school administration and sign up for the program so you can become a member. It's a great opportunity for students to continue to ride the bus. We clearly know that all of our riders, regardless of your income level, should have access to public transit. And we think that this is a great partnership with Alameda CTC to ensure that even students in our most vulnerable economic populations have the ability to also continue to use our services and get to school, which is really the most important relationship that could be built there. So please reach out.
But they also can use it to go to work and to go to the library or things like that, not just to go to school.
That's right. Alameda CTC's initial objective of creating the program was to ensure that students had a way to get to school, but clearly that pass is also valid, continues to be valid. So if you have work, if you need to go to appointments, it's also useful for that. Thank you, President Ortiz.
Thank you, President Ortiz and Nichelle. So somebody has asked a clarifying question, which we will, if Director Peebles is able, there's a question asking for clarification regarding what the rear hatch is. So it looks like Director Peebles, you wanted to answer this one?
Well, no, I answered another one about access, but the rear hatch, we have rear hatches on all of our buses except the MCIs, which are the big green buses that do Transbay. And it's a hatch there's a front hatch and a back hatch, and they serve two purposes. One, they do ventilation, and two, they serve as an emergency exit in the unbelievably rare instance where the bus turns over. But they're all there. And on the newer buses, it used to be the operator had to jump up and pop it open, but on the newer buses, they're all powered. So he just flips a switch on the dashboard.
Thank you, Director Peebles. This next one is going to go to our general manager. Somebody's asking why AC Transit rides are not free for more vulnerable people, since AC Transit had enough funds in the past.
Enough funds is a qualifying statement. It's total fare box revenue for AC Transit pre-COVID was $68 million. We would love to offer more low-income based fares. It's a matter of finding the funds to pay for it. The federal dollars, as the chief financial officer showed, bailed us out of the pandemic crisis so far. As he mentioned, there's another round of funding coming, funding on its way. We'll have to see what our ridership return is, what our fare box revenue is. Again, pre-pandemic, it's a $68 million total, so it's very expensive to offer free fare or reduced fares.
Thank you, General Manager. There's another question that's just come in, which I know has been answered, but I'm gonna put it out there again. This is to Robert. This is somebody else who's asking a specific question about when we will be bringing a specific line back. In this instance, it's the Route 47. But can you just give the general response of sort of what our plan is as we move forward?
Yeah, so we're looking at redoing the network and getting implementing a new network plan that'll go through public outreach and public hearing and board approval processes over the next year. And we hope to implement that new network in August of 2022. Now, if we get some funding and our revenue streams start to increase prior to that, then we'll start considering increasing some of those routes that may have lower ridership or less frequency, such as Route 47. But right now, we're going to fold that into the larger network plan. So it's really a wait and see to see how funding comes back to see what we can do in a time before that.
Thank you, Robert. The next question is going to go to our general manager. Can't we get more money for service from Biden's infrastructure proposal? Can you talk a little bit about what kind of work the district is doing in Sacramento and Washington, D.C.?
Absolutely, and really, Claudia and Beverly, to your credit, we're already working with our local elected delegation to do just that, to make a request in the infrastructure bill, as well as the various bailouts that have been offered, both to, again, restore service to the extent that we can. But we also, I mentioned 2040 for 100% zero emission. That includes, we need to update the infrastructure, our operating divisions. We have 4 of them. They're from the 70s and 80s. We think public transit will do very well in the infrastructure bill. We are very lucky to have FTA Administrator Nuria Fernandez, who was recently running Valley Transportation Authority. We know that Secretary Buttigieg is very public transit friendly. So we have lobbyists, we have our legislative and external affairs team working both in DC. We work with the California Transit Association, not for federal dollars, but also for cap and trade as an example in California to fund the replacement of buses is just one example where we are bugging elected officials and working with the administration pretty much on a daily, if not weekly basis right now.
Thank you, General Manager Hirsch. Here's a question that involves BART. I could see our BART Director, Robert Rayburn, is still with us. This is the second question this evening that involves BART. I think is indicative of the coordination that happens between our two agencies. So I'm going to read the question. BART service has been reduced so drastically in non-commute hours, and in those times, often bus service is very time consuming, and the walk to the Transbay terminal feels unsafe at night. Therefore, people are being forced into their cars, especially during off hours. Are you able to work with BART and request that they increase their service hours before this fall? Robert, that one's for you.
Sure. I'm not fully familiar with BART's process to add service, but I do know they make schedule changes on a periodic basis, and the next one is September. And I do know that all transit agencies have a pretty involved process in making service changes. That includes informing the public, letting the operators know, and updating our systems. So I know that BART has, and so they'll probably be bringing back the service in September.
Thank you, Robert. I see a question here that has to do with a BRT on San Pablo. There's rumors. Is it happening? What can you share? What's happening on the San Pablo corridor? Obviously not Alameda, but a major corridor in our service area.
Sure. So that's a great question, and it's something that AC Transit is very interested in. As you know, San Pablo travels through a number of cities and jurisdictions, and depending on which city you're in, there's different perspectives as to what the corridor should look like in terms of transit. And so some cities are heavily in favor of a bus rapid transit alignment along San Pablo, and others see it as more controversial. And so some of the other factors that we have to deal with are potential losses of parking. There's a median along San Pablo that I know some of the cities see as very valuable. And so that would have to be altered. And then we also have to figure out how we can incorporate bike facilities along with BRT. So right now, I don't think all of the local jurisdictions are on the same page. And what we're looking at is some sort of pilot project in the short term where we can provide service, some sort of BRT-like or BRT-light type of service, possibly through Oakland and Emeryville, but we still have to work that out with those cities to see what that would actually look like. So fingers crossed that we can get a short-term solution, and then that will probably lead to a positive long-term solution where we could have BRT on the full length of San Pablo Avenue, but it's all very much in the air.
Thank you, Robert. This next question is for the general manager. You did mention this in your remarks, but it was kind of brief. Is AC Transit hiring, and how can folks get a job?
Absolutely. The quickest way is to go to actransit.org and look on our careers tab. We are hiring multiple positions. Obviously, operators is a high priority for us to be able to restore service. We have maintenance openings. I would encourage folks looking for work to check that website weekly. We are still working on the ARPA funds, so we can't go wholesale hiring, but certainly for frontline operator positions and maintenance positions, we're hiring. Go to actransit.org.
Thank you, Mike. And with that, we are nearing the end of our program here. I want to give an opportunity for President Ortiz, followed by Director Peebles, to make some final remarks. And then we have some information about how you can stay engaged. President Ortiz.
Thank you. I just want to say again, thank you for joining us at these transit talks, and especially to learn what is happening as we attempt to recover from the pandemic and navigate a path forward. Again, thank you for spending your time with us.
I want to echo what President Ortiz just said. Thank you for joining this transit talk. And I certainly encourage you, as Robert Del Rosario has said, we are redesigning the network. There will be a series of public hearings and public meetings. And I would certainly encourage you to join all of those. And also, to the extent that you talk to any of your federal or state legislators, encourage them to keep remembering transit. They've done a very good job so far, but we definitely need to keep it up. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Peebles. I see that Harvey, one of our interpreters, has his hand up. So I want to make sure that we don't have any last questions out there. Harvey?
No. I think I think I put it by mistake. Sorry about that.
Okay, it's okay. It's okay. Just want to make sure that we get to everybody. So again,
Okay.
thank you for joining us this evening. This is the first in a series of Transit Talks forums like this that we are going to host. The next one is this Thursday evening. It's going to be focused on the communities of Hayward and the unincorporated areas of Alameda County. But like I mentioned, we really do want you to stay engaged with us. Thank you to all of you who joined today. We have set up a web page at actransit.org/talks, where we have the listing of the upcoming meetings. We have set up a dedicated email, talks@actransit.org. We have 3 phone lines where you can leave questions, comments. Oh, Harvey, can you mute? Thank you. The English information line, 891-7205. In Chinese, 891-7286. And in Espanol, 891-7210. You can also write to us at 6 and send your comments via snail mail to 1600 Franklin. And I think that with that, we are going to wrap it up. We are about 5 minutes ahead of schedule. Again, thank you all for participating. When Tammy closes this Zoom, you will automatically see a satisfaction survey that pops up on your screen. We would appreciate it if you could take just 1 minute to take that survey. Let us know how we did, how the visuals, the audio. There was one comment, we acknowledge that in the chat box about one of the presenters' audios. So thank you for that. We will make note for the next meeting. And I think that with 5 minutes left, we are adjourned for the evening. Thank you for joining AC Transit's Transit Talks. Have a good night, everybody.